Hello. Good morning.
All right. Oh, look, we've. I thought I saw people coming in, but we're going live. So we are live. First 15 seconds of being live here, end of March. So I know that a lot of us are looking forward to warmer weather, sunnier skies. If it was, it was like near 80 yesterday in Indiana. So lots of crazy weather patterns, but we are glad that you're with us. This time goes by pretty quickly because this is really a natural conversation, and we want you to be a part of this conversation. So wherever you're joining, because we're streaming live on Facebook, LinkedIn, also our YouTube. So feel free to post a comment. We'll see if we can see those. And just join along in the discussion, because we all have wisdom. We all have that inner leader inside of us that has a lot of things to share. So my name is Eilis Wasserman, and I am our program director at Schaefer Leadership. And every month, we hope to dive into the essence of leadership through genuine storytelling, sharing unique perspectives, and exploring hot topics to inspire and empower leaders on their journey to authenticity and success. So that is the purposes of Authentic Leadership Live. We've been doing this well over 2 years now. And really our mission at Schaefer Leadership, where we both work, is to really provide inclusive leadership development so that individuals, communities, and organizations can reach their full potential. So speaking of reaching that full potential, Tisha and I also really like to start out every single session sharing our personal mission statement. So like I said, I'm our program director at Schaefer. My personal mission statement is to really cultivate competence and inspire self-discovery. Tisha?
Thank you, Ailish. And I can't believe it's been over 2 years for everybody who's joining us. But this is something Ailish and I really believe in, providing little nuggets every month to help folks be the best they can be wherever they're at. And I am Tisha Gerhart, Chief Facilitation Officer at Schaefer Leadership Academy. And when you think about the history and why we started Authentic Leadership, it goes back to my mission to inspire, to make a difference wherever I'm at so that people feel valued and add value to others. And that's exactly what we want to do. We want you to have a better conversation starting right after this session, utilizing a tool whenever you can and actually find space for it, when you can actually practice it. And so there's not a real, I think, time frame of it. It's that, wow, this is a tool I've learned and I want to use it. And so seeing those opportunities, I often say and share with folks that if you're aware of it, you can acknowledge it. And if you acknowledge it, then you begin to see opportunities. And that's exactly what we want you to do with Authentic Leadership. See opportunities to use tools to have better conversations.
Yeah.
So we're so excited to be here this morning.
Yes, yeah, and we'll often bring guests in to talk, that have wisdom to share. But this topic is something that I was like, this is something I feel that Tisha really shines in this area. No one's perfect, right? This is an art per se. But Tisha, you just talked about like having better conversations, and even before the conversation is had, when we enter a space. When we are with a group of people, how are we reading the room? How are we picking up on the energy of the room? And so that is the topic of today, is the art of reading the room. And so, Tisha, reading the room I think it's a very, it's a unique skill set. And it's something that over time we can grow in, we can get better at, we can improve at. But why do you think this skill set is so important?
Well, for me, honesty, you think about conversation, and if I'm not in tune to who's in the room, their facial expressions, the energy to the room, that is going to change how the conversation goes. And so I particularly look for this before I even get started, Ailish. I can, sometimes I'll play music before the session gets started, because I want to set the tone for the environment. I know for you, even in the virtual sessions, you have started with some music, or you have a little screen up, and maybe it's a beautiful picture just to set the tone for where you're headed. And I think what's important to know, even though we want to set the tone by playing music, or that nice little landscape and whatever it is, how are people when they show up? Where's their mindset? Are they ready to engage? And so I'm honestly looking for the energy in the room. And are they ready right off the bat, playing off my energy? Are they ready to engage? Are they talking to each other? And it's just looking for that. And also, I'm not even looking to see if they're talking to each other. I'm looking who's talking, who are they sitting by, who might be silent, who's sitting by themselves. I mean, these are things that I do in prep, for the session, or for an engagement, even if it's family gatherings. So I'm not just talking about Tisha the facilitator. I'm talking about Tisha in any space I'm at. Even if I'm like in a line at Walmart, I'm looking at the people who are talking. I'm noticing the people who aren't. I'm so inclined to engage the ones who aren't. So it is something within me. So number one, I'm looking for that energy, who's engaging, who's being distracted and maybe looking over here, because that might be a squirrel moment for me too. If that makes sense. And if folks are distracted, especially if I'm speaking about something else, then I need to speak about that. What's going on over there? You guys tell me, what you're seeing, what's happening. And the last one I look for is alignment with people. If they're distracted and they're saying, yeah, we are, looking for that nodding, showing body language that we're on alignment or something's missing. So those are like 3 things that I use before I even get started. Do you use those, Eilish?
Sorry, say that again.
Do you use those at all?
Yeah, well, what really stuck out to me there is that like alignment. And so I want to kind of dive into that a little bit more. Like when you say kind of alignment, and it makes me think of presence in the room, because and also just meeting people where they're at. Because if you're over here and they're over there and you're not aligned and you're in just different spaces and different places, like that conversation is going to be really hard to actually move forward. And so I guess I wonder, like, if we could talk a little bit more about, like, when you're entering that space, like, how do you get in alignment and kind of meet people where they're at, Tisha?
No, that's a great question. And for me, I feel the energy in the room. So even if they're distracted or confused, or I feel tension, I'm intrigued to go there a little bit. Tell me what's on your mind. I'm noticing that you guys are quiet this morning. Let's talk about that. Where are we at? What's on your mind? What's been happening? And if it's kind of like crucial conversations for me, that is the crucial conversation. And I know the tools well enough that I can't move forward in my topics or my little, bullet points that I need to go through for the day if we're not aligned. And so that's really important to me to even say out loud to the room. I'm noticing that you guys seem down a little bit today. Can we talk about that? Where are we at? And I have found the more times I do that, that's where the alignment happens. That's where participants really come connected with me. And then our energy kind of gets together. It bonds, if you will. Because they're not ready to take any tools away or to hear me, or put them in groups and talk if they are not in alignment with moving forward.
Right. Yeah. It just makes me think about, like you said, the word connection, right? Because that alignment means truly being connected. And that trust. I mean, everyone who's watched us, we always say everything goes back to trust. Everything goes back to trust. So we're always going to talk about trust and being an authentic leader. but it's that process of, and truth be told, not every space or place you're going into, you're going to know the people, right? So
No.
it's not like you're going to have that automatic trust with them, but it's almost kind of, honestly, Tisha, what you're talking about here too, it makes you think about this concept of first impressions, right? And we talk about that in the world of professionalism, and in my experience, talking about, like, if you're in an interview, you're networking, like, how are you making that great first impression? Because there's these spaces and places, you might be at a corporate meeting and you want to connect to people in the room and have that great first impression.
Well, and when you brought up first impression, it really hits home, because if I am not willing to align with the people in the room, or anyone else, if you're not willing to align with the people in the room and hit the mark on energy so that you guys can be on the same page, or connected, then what happens is the trust is number one. You're not building it in that moment. I'm probably not being my authentic self because I recognize there's something wrong in the room, but I'm not acknowledging it. And if I can acknowledge tension or a distraction in the room, everybody else, I'm not going to say 100% everybody can, but it's felt. And so for me, thinking about, okay, Tisha, yeah, you got this whole session to go through. You got topics, or even if we're in a meeting, that's probably the only thing on those people's minds is the distraction. So I got to get over myself, right? My insecurity that I have this whole agenda to go through. I only have an hour. I gotta tell them all this. But if they're not in the right mindset, are they even going to remember what you just said?
Yeah.
And I think that's the powerful thing. Why are you there? What do they need to know? And even if it takes 15, 20 minutes or half the meeting to get everybody on the same page, if you don't take that time to do that, you're losing people. And it kind of going back to what I said about crucial conversations, you have to make it safe before you can move on with the conversation. And safe is just noticing, body language. Maybe somebody is all folded, chaired back, and they're not engaged at all. How do you invite them to the table? Because meaning, how do I invite them to the table? How do I create a space for them to engage instead of just sitting like this? Because if they're not engaged, then going back, there's a reason they were invited to the meeting. Yes. They have an expertise that the rest of us need to hear. Mm-hmm. And I think it's okay to say that in a group, to say, hey, we're all here for a purpose. We all got the invite for a purpose. And I really would like to hear from everybody. Yeah. Are we on the same page? I'm sensing there's some frustration. Can we talk about it before we get started?
Yeah. I mean, I love this session. I think, there's all these things are happening simultaneously at once, right? Like, it's very quick. And so one other thing that I want to bring up, I think it's a little bit more formal than just like feeling the energy, but I think it's important, is that, especially if you're in a meeting, a facilitation with a group, is that being in alignment is also in agreement with how you're moving forward with whatever conversation that you're having. And so you want to read the room, but as you're reading the room, I think I always, in these spaces and places, think about, okay, this conversation is not just about me speaking and talking to you. We all have a part in this conversation, and making that kind of that welcoming, inclusive environment where everyone feels like they are able to contribute, I think is really important. And I think it's what you're alluding to. And so in order to, foster that sense of two-way communication and contributions, and this often happens in teaching spaces, gathering guidelines or expectations for how the conversation is going, right? Even if you talk about this briefly, you write them up on the board, but how are we going to have this discussion? What are some things that we are going to agree to as we have this, as we go forward.
I think that's great. Ailish and I had an opportunity to be online doing a virtual session together. Gosh, it's been about a week now, week and a half maybe. And setting the expectations up front, it was a virtual session. We were online, ready to go, and maybe one person had their camera on. And that was time for me to set the expectation. Hey, we're here because it was actually it was an employee engagement survey. So we were there to do a session based on those results. And we're here for you. We're here because of your voice. And we're going to be here for 90 minutes. And I need you to turn your cameras on. That's important. It's important for us to interact. It's important for us to move forward in understanding why those results were the way they were. And also so that we can talk about the tools we need to help grow the organization. And they did. They turned their cameras on. And afterwards, I had somebody ask me if they had their cameras on. And I said, yeah, because I set that as an expectation right up front, and the value of doing it and why we were doing it. I think that's important. I think also there's ways, if you know me, I'm an extrovert, and I sometimes assume everybody wants to talk. Another tool I will use in a room is, on a scale from 1 to 5, how aligned are we? How clear are we on these objectives? Is just asking them. And I actually worked fabulous in a session I did a couple months ago. And one person, they said where they were, which started everybody else. If you can get one person to share, how many of you are 4 in the room right now? How many of you are 2? Do I have any 1s? Because that's okay. Because sometimes people can't verbalize it, or they don't have it, they just don't feel comfortable.
Yes.
And then once you have folks in the room telling them, where I want everybody to be a 5, what would move you up 1 point? Let me give you a moment to let me give you a moment to think about that. And I'd love to move everybody up 1 point. Let's talk about that. Which goes what Eilis said. What is the expectation? How do we move everybody up 1 point? Write it down. I have my thoughts, but the folks in the room are really why you're there.
Yeah.
And that's another reason that you got to get over yourself in that moment. But I think that's a really good tool, just to ask the room, where are they on a scale to 1 to 5? And then how might we move ourselves up 1 point?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that, Tisha. I mean, it's that pulse check. And actually, I was thinking about one of our favorite facilitators, Adam Bowson. And one thing he does, and it's kind of a similar way, because there's many ways you can do this pulse check, right? Tisha talked about these kind of scaling these questions. And he pulls up on the screen like, all these different smiley faces, and they all have different emotions, right? And so which one are you resonating with today, and why? And kind of just to kind of get the room kind of going. And so just that quick check-in, because if we don't check in there, we don't really know where people are at. And one thing that I wanted to point out too, Tisha, is that we're talking is, and this is really I think a subtle part of reading the room, and it's not easy, because I think that reading the room is a skill set that we can all grow in. Sometimes it may come more naturally to others. I mean, it has to do a lot with our own intuition, and our own intuition, that gut feeling, it's not always correct. But we and I'm a very intuitive person, but you just think about, there's some people in the room, and they might be there, Tish, and they're ready to learn, but they're quiet. And Tish and I talk a lot about introverts and extroverts, and just that energy, and we all have a different type of energy. Just because somebody is either really loud or really quiet, it doesn't mean that they're not listening. It doesn't mean that they're not keyed in. There could be something going on, but we also have to check our assumptions, and maybe we check in with folks. But there can be some, everyone learns differently. And so I want to point that out, is, we have to be aware of those differences.
No, I appreciate that, because early on in my journey of facilitation, I would assume, and I had to be careful about that, because then I'm like, then that plays in my head. If I'm assuming folks who are doodling, I'm assuming they're not paying attention because they're doodling. Well, they need something to do. Just because they're creatively doodling, or messing with a pen and tearing it up, whatever they're doing, doesn't mean they can't hear me. And it took me a while to understand that. Or just because somebody in the room's being quiet doesn't mean that they don't have anything to say. And Ailish, you've helped me, actually, provided some insight on allowing time, scheduling time for people to be reflective. And it's interesting because I'm watching the room, as people, let's this is a question for you just to reflect on and write a note about. I'm always watching who puts the pen down first. And but then so they're kind of anxious because I'm waiting on the folks that haven't put their pens down at all. They're still writing, but that's really helped me watch the room. And I may say, for those that are finished, I want you to also think about this, just to keep their minds going, because what happens is I might lose them, but I also need to have a balance so I keep these others engaged who are still reflecting.
Yeah, absolutely, Tish. I mean, and this, we could have a whole other session about, how do we engage people in the room that are quiet, and think about different learning styles, right? Like that can be a whole other session, really. But this power of just being able to tap into, to the energy in the room and kind of the unspoken dynamics, because there's a saying out there, like, what is unsaid is just as powerful as what's said.
And that is so true. I think the key of any good facilitator in reading the room is to remember that themselves. And, it's okay, even in a reflection exercise, or if everybody's talking and gathering, and now we've kind of came to a closure, to ask, whose voice haven't we heard yet? Am I missing anything? Does somebody have a comment that maybe that you've been thinking about and want to share? This is, I want to give you that space. Whose voice haven't we heard yet? And then pause, because perhaps that person's still thinking, or they're reading the room themselves. Is now a time for me? There's all kinds of things that go over in our mind, but I think we, as facilitators, teachers, hosts, if you will, have to create a space so voices can be heard, even though they need to reflect a little bit.
Yeah. The power of pause is something that I think is overlooked in a very fast-paced world. Like, we've got this meeting agenda, let's go, right? And how are we creating moments for pause? Because that also allows us to check in on the room. We've been talking, Tish, I'll say, we've been talking a lot, about like the beginning of the session, impressions, but when we look at holistically from beginning to end, we still need to be checking in as we go through the session, and allowing, again, that pause, because we might have lost people 10 minutes ago. Are they still on the same page with us?
Well, and if we don't create a space where there's a pause and we can check in, class is going very fast. Our time right here is going very fast. What haven't we covered yet? Who has a question that maybe we overlooked or ran through very quickly? And allowing people to have that space to come back to the session. And perhaps even for those fast talkers and extroverts that are just there and going, they might have had a question that they just bulldozed right over, and you're allowing them to have another space to come back to something they thought of, but it just, we just bulldozed right through it. So I think it works for both cases to allow that space, to make sure. And question time, sometimes we go so fast and we're going through that agenda and we don't allow time for folks to have questions.
Yeah. Well, speaking of questions, I don't know if our, sometimes the comments feature I can't see in our system, but I just, if you have any questions that I know we have at least a dozen people watching us, questions or insights to share about how you read the room, recommendations that you have. We'd love to hear that. So we'll take a pause, right? We'll pause.
That's hard for me to do, but I know it's needed. Well, and I think, again, Ailish and I, when you think about authentic leadership, it's being authentic, it's being real, it's being able to take a pause and be our true selves and understand that I do know I move pretty quickly. I can bulldoze right through it. And if I recognize that in myself, then I can see some opportunities to slow down.
Yeah.
I also, oh, looky there, the power of pause. I love that. Thank you.
Oh, we see comments. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about 3 ways to read any room. Again, I want to give a tool a nugget away. Scan it. Before you even start, scan it. Take a moment. It's okay. There's Frank. Thanks, Frank. And test it. If you see something happening in the room and you're noticing some hesitation, or you're noticing that, hey, not everybody's aligned, or there's some tension in the room, name it. Take a pause right there and say, hey, I'm feeling this in the room, can we talk about it? And then measure it. Let's I know we're not all, our scales aren't at a 5 today. How many of you are at a 4? How many of you are at a 3? Just write it down. You don't even have to share it with me. Just write it down. Now let's talk about what would move you up a point.
Yeah. What would move you up a point? And, Tisha, I do want to acknowledge too that we all are natural as human beings. A lot of us do love that positive energy. And we hope that everyone's having a good day. But let's be realistic. Some days are just really hard. Some days, and it could be something could be affecting a lot of people in the room, just a couple of people in the room. But what do we do on those just really hard days? Because we're just struggling to get to, maybe out of 5, we're struggling to get it to a 2 that day, Tisha.
For me as a facilitator, especially if I have something going on that's occupying my mind, I'll name it. I'll say, hey, you guys, I have to be honest. Today's hard. And, I know we all have hard days, and I'll be authentic enough to share. I normally, and this is my mind and how it works, I'll tie it back to what the subject is. Mm-hmm. And so perhaps if I'm having a hard day, you're having a hard day. And this is a space that we can recognize that. And in our journey of leadership, we have those.
Absolutely.
So I think it's like acknowledging it. And I believe in vulnerability. If I can't acknowledge it myself as the leader in the room, the facilitator, the teacher, then how do I expect other people to meet there?
Yeah. Meet people where they're at. And as Tish and I have been talking a lot, like we do acknowledge that, we do a lot of facilitation, but we want to acknowledge that, as we've said, it doesn't matter if you're facilitating, you're just entering a space, right? So like we talked about, it might be a family gathering. It could be you are hosting some new friends at your house. It could be that, you're at in a busy space in public. And so all these things that we're talking about can be applied in different spaces and places. It's not just from that facilitator mindset, because we're all engaging with other human beings.
Thank you for that, Eilis. You said that so well. I also, I think I want to share, and I know we're coming in at a time, we're all leaders. It doesn't matter the title. I believe we're all leaders because there's always somebody watching, observing, whether you're in the store, at the stoplight, there's just people around. And so what influence can you have on others? And where's your mindset? And how can you meet somebody? And it takes me back to servant leadership. I think about where leadership came from, and it's about other people. You can't influence if you're not having that mindset of servancy to other people.
Yes. Yeah. That's a fabulous takeaway. That this is really what Authentic Leadership Live is about. And I guess, Tisha, one takeaway I wanted to leave folks with, because I was thinking a lot about this, and it goes back to presence and also that pause. But we need to check ourselves at the door before we enter the room. And what I mean by that is that the practice of being fully present. I mean, we could have a whole other session on how to be present, really. But that is so important in order to even be able to read the room, because you talk about the grocery store, you talk about different places. We've got things that are filling our mind. We've got distractions in our mind. We've got things going on in our head. And how can we actually just be fully present with that person or these people in that space? That's not an easy thing to do. We can say it right here, but when you're actually experiencing it, it's something that I found myself practicing, and I have other people practice of, like, how can we just be keyed in, because we're thinking about what's the next thing I need to do, or what's the next thing on the agenda. But how can you just, like, literally be present in the moment?
I think is what you just said. You have to practice it. You have to want it. You have to notice an opportunity. It's kind of like, you buy this red car and you think nobody has a red car. And once you're in that red car, you're looking around, you're like, everybody has a red car. Looks just like mine. It's because you're aware of it and you're seeing the opportunity. So my hope for folks today, and my goal, is that Eilis and I have brought this to light so that you can see an opportunity to take a pause, to connect with somebody, to see whose voice isn't being heard and invite them to the table. There's all these things that we can do, but if we're not looking for an opportunity, it will pass you by.
Yeah. We need to notice. We need to observe, right? We think about sometimes when we're walking down the street, there's kind of this mindset that people are looking at the ground, they're not looking up, right? And noticing things that we haven't noticed before, like being very observant, that's a skill set. That's part of reading that room. And yes, we need to practice. So we hope that you all practice in places and spaces, and ultimately go back to being your authentic self, right? Because bringing your authentic self to the room and your own energy, that's important, instead of trying to be somebody that you're not, right? And so Tisha brings a different presence than I bring.
Yeah. And that's okay. That's totally okay. It reminds me, quick story before we end, because I know we're at time. I am not the best speller. I have gotten better, especially with writing on the whiteboards, and things in classes and sessions. And it's interesting to me because I'll name it right up front, and I'll give people full permission, because I know there's somebody out in the room. And if I've missed an R or an E or something like that, that's the only thing they can focus on. So I give everybody full permission. Hey, if I'm missing something, you just come right up here and you see me now, or you can see me after, or you can just silently come and fix it. Give people permission and voice it in the room. It's the best thing you can do for yourself.
Oh, I love that. That's authentic. That's being an authentic leader right there. So Tisha, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone. As you can see, we could keep talking about this. So we're just about 3 minutes over our time right now. But we will be posting dates for, the next 3 months for Authentic Leadership Live. If you have any ideas of topics, things that we should be talking about, or guests, or you want to be a guest, please let us know. And we wish you all the best and a great start to the spring. Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye. Thank you.